Welcome back. I'd like to take you through the major components of the developer.android.com website, partly to show you what information is available, partly to show you where to get the SDK, and partly to give you a sense of design guidelines and other major pieces and resources that you'll find there. So where we left off is that I was on the dashboards page, and if I go back to the home page here, I'm actually in the developer section now. Here is the Android M Developer Preview advertising at the top. They have a direct link to getting the SDK and browsing samples as well. But instead of doing that, I'm going to click on this little design link at the top. Now here they're going to start talking about the actual look and feel of the application, especially with the material design option. Now, material design was introduced with Android 5 and is therefore not available on very many devices at the moment. This, of course, will go up. One of the topics that we will look at is how to take advantage of material design for the devices that support it while still being able to work with the older themes for the devices that do not yet handle material yet. So if I look through here, I see there's a whole bunch of information, and if I go to the components section, then I see something very interesting. This page right here lists all the different components, and if I click on, say, buttons, then you will see here that they have a discussion of what they look like and how they're supposed to be used throughout your application. Floating action buttons, raised buttons, flat buttons. And they show pictures to give you an idea what they look like. They give you guidelines. Now that I'm going to magnify this, I'm going to lose my border on the left, but that's all right. I just want you to be able to see this. See how you can choose your button style and using buttons in dialogues and various dimensions and on and on and on. So that if your primary interest in mobile development is the look and feel of the user interface, this is a section where you'll spend a lot of time. This is a section that will go through all the different widgets, as they call them, and give you their guidelines for doing a well-designed look and feel for your application. If you are more like me, however, if you're someone who comes from a server-side Java background, then you won't spend as much time here, but it's good to know things are there. As we know, over time, what we've learned over time is that users care very much about the UX, about the user experience, the look and feel of the application. And if they like the application, they will give you a chance to make it functional and have everything they want in it. And if they don't like the look and feel of the application, they'll simply uninstall it. So even more than in web applications, the look and feel of an Android application is crucial to its long-term success. That said, I now want to go back to the rest of the developer site and see what's there. So if I go to the developer tab or the develop tab here, you'll see there's a whole series of tabs underneath it. The first one is training. Now, I want to mention there's some good things and some bad things here. The good things is that they have several very interesting little tutorials, which they call courses and everything, building your first app or adding an action bar, and so on and so on. The problem is that they don't update these things very often. So a lot of them are using support libraries we're not terribly interested in using anymore. They also are a little bit thin in how far they go. I mean, they do get you started, but you're very quickly left with, okay, well, what do I do next, sort of thing. So I don't want to say don't look at them, just don't expect too much out of them. They're not bad. Now, the next section is the set called API Guides, and this really is very useful. This has many different sections to talk about how to put the various components together. If I look under components, for example, you'll see there are terms like activities and intents and intent filters and services and fragments and on and on and on. We are going to spend a lot of time on different pieces of this section. We are going to discuss all the different pieces here. Now, one of the difficult parts of learning Android, one of the challenges, is that oftentimes the words they use don't match the images we have in our heads about them. For example, when we talk about a single screen on an Android application, that's called an activity. I wouldn't necessarily have known that when I first came into Android. But a single screen with widgets and a layout and everything is known as an activity. And in order to go from one activity to another, we need something called an intent, which has the possibility of having intent filters as well to determine what to do. And these intents can be implicit and explicit. We're going to have a whole wide range of topics like this, and we will go through them one by one. But I just mentioned these now to let you know that part of the battle will be getting used to the lingo, just becoming accustomed to it. Now the next tab is a reference tab, and this looks and feels very much like what we would call Java docs. So this, of course, brings up the natural question, is this Java? And the answer is, well, it depends on who you ask. The technical answer is no, of course it's not Java, or otherwise they would have lost those lawsuits. And the actual answer is that it's kind of like Java, it feels like Java, but it's only the beginnings. In Android, you do have to work with Java, but after you have compiled your application, then it goes through an additional phase, a DEX process, converting into a binary format that is supported by what they call the Dalvik virtual machine, not the Java virtual machine. So we'll come back to all that later, but I want to point out that while this looks like Java docs, and you can treat it like Java docs, technically speaking, this is not really Java. These packages all begin with the word Android, except that when I get past the Android packages, you'll see I have plenty of packages that begin with the word Java, and then packages that begin with the word JavaX, so that it looks and feels much like Java through much of the API. Now, what version of Java is it? Well, that, again, is not really a relevant question because it's none of them. It doesn't fit any of the editions of Java. I would say that the closest idea is that it feels like something between Java 1.6 and Java 1.7 in terms of the standard edition. But really, Android is its own thing that's a little bit different. Now, before I go on, one last thing I want to show you about this section is you'll notice that there are several packages that are in gray here. And what is the reason for that? Well, you'll notice here, over where it says Android APIs, there's a little section here that says API level. And if I mouse over it, it says select your API level, select your target API. And when I click on this, you'll see there are those API numbers we were talking about before. And I'm currently on 16. The way this works is that if a package is in Android but is not supported by the API level you have chosen, it shows up in gray. So these Camera 2 or Display APIs are not available under 16. If I was to bump it up to 20, for example, the Display one just showed up and so did another. If I bump it up to 22, now everything is available. So this is actually very convenient as a way for you to be aware of what exists at all and yet restricted to only the parts that you're interested in for your particular application. The very last thing that I want to show you on this is that the one thing we know Google does very well is search. And up here in the right-hand corner, we have a little magnifying glass. And rather than have to dig through the Java docs to find the class we want, all I have to do is type in, say, string, and you can see I get an immediate drop-down with links to resources or the Android R string or java.lang.string or many, many other options. And if I click on that, now you can see I've gone directly to the string class and have all of its information. That magnifying class is wonderful. You will spend lots of time there. It's the sort of search mechanism we have needed on Java docs from day one and never had. I really miss it when I leave Android development. So we'll spend a lot of time looking at that. So that's basically a coverage of the design section and a little bit of the developer part of this website. In our next section, we'll take a look at the tools, how to download and install the SDK, and get started with the Android Studio IDE when it comes time to build an Android application.